Dear students, hello and welcome. Today we are going to discuss the process and organization of Vedic education. The objectives of this lecture will be to get an idea about the Vedic education system in general, get familiar with the different methods of teaching and the organizational system of Vedic education in India. To understand the impact of Vedic education on the modern system of Indian education with special reference to methods of teaching and the organizational setup. Let's now discuss in detail the methods of Vedic education. In Vedic age, education was primarily imparted through spoken word, that's orally. Before the Upanayan ceremony, which was known as initiation into the teaching and learning, the child had to learn the language and the occupation of the family, of course, informally. Rishis or sages used to educate the children in the family itself through this oral method. In the formal school, which was called Gurukul, the methods that were used for teaching were 1. Listening or Sarvana method. This method was based on listening to the teacher who recited Vedic hymns and verses with proper pronunciation and intonation. Students would copy the teacher who would give them enough drill. The medium of instruction, of course, was Sanskrit. Special care was taken of vowels, consonants, samasas, that's called the compound words, and sandhi or sandhis, that's the rules for joining of words. A recitation and hearing of hymns and Ved mantras was repeatedly practiced. It's on this account that Vedas were also known as Shrutis, which means a heard and repeated and committed to memory. Knowledge in Vedic period was not preserved in books and libraries as printing had not come into existence. It was instead preserved in an individual just like his blood through the process of memorization. This method was called oral method and was usually meant for the students of average intelligence. For the gifted ones, other methods of teaching were used, such as deliberation method. This was also known as Chintan Manan method. It was a higher method of teaching and involved deliberations on the topic after careful thinking. Deep thinking or contemplation was called Manan and recollection was called Chintan. Free and frank discussion through question-answer technique would form a part of deliberations. Intellectual appreciation of the truth was possible through this method only. Meditation method was another important method. Meditation was required for realization of the truth, which is described as darshana or perception of truth. Compared to intellectual appreciation of the truth, meditation enables one to become conscious of only one object, that is the Brahma or the Creator or the God. The teacher instructs the child to continue the process of self-development and at the same time retain his identity with the Brahma. Next is illustration method. In Vedic education, the teacher used illustrations and similes as devices of teaching. Clarification of subject matter was made with the help of dishtant, that is, examples. It's believed that the modern maxims of teaching, like simple to complex, known to unknown, concrete to abstract, and empirical to rational, were followed by the teachers of Vedic period also. Next method is project method. This method was adopted only in certain situations. For example, the Kshatriya and the Vaishya students had to adopt practical projects in the form of warlike feats and industrial arts. Their training was quite essential for the success in life. Now, two important considerations and specific characteristic features of Vedic education are: number one, individualized instruction, and second, monitorial system. The individualized instruction technique was used while teaching, wherein each pupil was taught separately. This technique is considered to be psychologically sound even today. Unlike the classroom system of modern age, every student received individual attention from the teacher in Vedic period. Though there was no scope for competitiveness among the students, but still we find that some students would excel and could compete with others, which was possible due to individual attention. The monitorial system, which was invented for the first time in Vedic period, had its roots in the availability of competent and efficient senior students who would take care of the junior ones and could replace their teacher in his absence. This system made the monitors responsible, well-behaved leaders in the school and later in the society. Well, that was about the methods. Now, the second part is the organization and administration of Vedic education. Let's now take up organization. In Vedic period, there was no such administrative and organizational setup as obtains today. Education was an individualized effort. It was restricted to Brahmins only, though later it was extended to the other two castes, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas. In all cases, it started from home, where sages would teach the child the language of the family and the ancestral occupation. As I said earlier, they also taught him certain religious rituals. Gurukul was the first and the last formal institution of education in ancient times, which in the later Vedic age took the form of an ashram. After the child learned the language and the occupation and traditions of the family informally, he was initiated into formal education and was sent to the Gurukul, which is the house of Guru. Gurukul was the summum bonum insofar as the institutional and organizational structure is concerned. The other two similar types of institutions were Rishikuls and Acharyakuls. which functioned without any direction and guidance from the society. Organizers, managers, and administrators of the present type were totally non-existent. Formal education started with the Upnayan ceremony, which was the initiating ceremony. It was not compulsory in the beginning for receiving formal education in the Gurukul, but later in the post-Vedic period, it became compulsory. Now, the etymological meaning of Upnayan is to take one near or to come near. In the context of education, this word meant that the student should come near or should be brought near the teacher for receiving education. In the post-Vedic period, this ceremony became so important that it was usually regarded as the second birth of an individual. Thus, Brahmins began to be called Dvij, that is, the twice born or born again. The two births signified the physical birth and the spiritual birth. On the occasion of Upnayan ceremony, the Guru or the preceptor used to give to the boy his mantra or the advice, and his spiritual life began from this point. This means that from this day and time his education started, which ultimately led to his spiritual development in the due course of time. On this occasion, only the parents of the child would be present and none else. So, no administrator, no organizer, no supervisor, and the like. The parents would give some gifts or some money to the teacher at this time, which was called samidha. The preceptor or the teacher, by making a pious resolve before a sacrificial fire in presence of the parents, established with the people a material as well as spiritual contact. Henceforth, it was the responsibility of the Guru to provide a living place, that's called the habitat, food, clothing, etc. to the student. The student became a part of his family and thus would be fed, nursed, and protected by the teacher in all respects. In return, the child would do everything at the command of the teacher. There was no uniform rule for the duration of education, but it's certain that education would normally start from the age of 8 to 12 years and would continue up to the age of 36 years. On the basis of the period of education, the students were divided into three categories. 1. Those obtaining education up to the age of 24 years, they were called Vasu. Second, those obtaining education up to the age of 36 years would be called Rudra. And third, those obtaining education up to the age of 48 years would be called Aditya. After receiving education for 12 to 24 years, the child would leave the Gurukul and enter domestic life. Some meritorious and capable students would continue to remain there and adopt the profession of their teacher. Now, let's discuss the second part of the organization of education, that's administration. There was no formal administrative and supervisory system as we find today. But at the same time, the system of education was well organized and was considered supreme in the contemporary world. The content, the methodology, and other related matters were so effective that even the present time managers and organizers of the most advanced systems of education admire the ancient Indian educational system. Self-imposed restrictions on the part of all concerned made the system most disciplined and thus effective. Total educational system was organized and managed jointly by the parents, the teachers, and the students. While major role in managing the system was played by the teacher. In later Vedic age, we find that some devoted and sincere community members would be associated by the teacher in managing the ashram's affairs. Now, another related part of the organizational administration of education is certification and convocation. There was no formal examination and certification system in Vedic education. Success in real life situations was the test of one's efficiency and overall effectiveness of education. After receiving education for 12 years or more, the students used to assemble near the teacher for blessings before going home. The teacher, on this occasion, used to give some pieces of advice for happy and smooth running of the future life of students, that is the household or the grihastha. How to take care of the society and the nation, and how to serve the humanity as a whole. This was done by the teacher in a ceremony which was known as Samavartan Samaroha, that's like the modern convocation. The life and education of children would be quite economical, as the living and dietary habits would be simple and non-luxurious. A rearing of milch animals, growing of food crops and vegetables around the ashram would serve as a supplementary economic resource. Begging of alms and receipt of samidha and dakshina from the community were the main sources of income. The system was therefore devoid of budgeting and allocation of funds from any government of the type of present times. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you for watching this lecture.